Hey, it's Marco here from Fair Realty. Today I'm talking about why I dislike unrepresented parties in real estate so much. I had a bad experience a week ago that I'm going to go over, but let me backtrack a bit. So before 2018, something called limited dual agency was allowed in BC. 2018, the BC government banned limited dual agency, but prior to that, buyers could email the listing agent, go view a property, and then that listing agent could represent both the seller and the buyer via something called limited dual agency, which I thought was completely ridiculous. I have many reasons why I think it's ridiculous or was ridiculous. For example, I own a number of condos in Victoria. I've been the strata president in corporations. I've been the strata treasurer. I know what the crap strata corporations are in Victoria and what the good ones are. And sometimes people call me to list properties in strata corporations I know are underfunded, they're not well run, but that seller is paying me to sell that unit. So with limited dual agency, if a buyer comes and they want to buy that unit, how am I supposed to be fair in that limited dual agency situation? Do I tell the buyer that it's a crap strata corporation and shoot my seller in the foot who's paying me the real estate commission? Or do I tell the buyer that it's a great strata corporation when I know it's a crap strata corporation? I have many other examples of why I was not a fan of limited dual agency. But what limited dual agency created for is it created for an environment where approximately 10 to 15% of buyers opted not to work with a buyer's agent. They would go to realtor.ca, and on realtor.ca there's a button called book a showing where the listing agents emailed directly and a showing is set up. I had nothing but bad experiences in 8 years dealing with unrepresented parties off realtor.ca. Let me give you one example. Every year I work with 50 buyers that engage me as their buyer's agent to help them find a property. Maybe once a year out of hundreds and hundreds of homes that I show to my buyers, does a buyer not show up to an appointment. But if it happens once a year, my buyer phones me and says, hey Marco, we had a flat tire, our child is sick, I'm sorry, but we can't make it 6 p.m. tonight to the showing. I kid you not, in the 8 years when I was showing all these unrepresented parties my listings, not an exaggeration, 60 to 70% would show up to the showing, but 30 to 40% of those showings we booked through realtor.ca, people simply did not show up while I'm organizing for the tenants to clear out, or the sellers are cleaning up that home and skipping dinner, going out for dinner, and 30 to 40% of these realtor.ca bookings would simply not show up. Why is that? Because it's a perfect opportunity for tire kickers to go book a showing, we set up a time, and they don't show up, and there's no consequences. More than once, I drove out to Souk, the buyer off realtor.ca didn't show up, and then I had to drive back. I wasted 2.5 hours of my time for complete nonsense. Well, 2018, limited dual agency is banned. The government allows unrepresented parties to still operate within the system. However, the government says unrepresented parties need to acknowledge these two forms that specify the risks of being an unrepresented buyer. Once that came in, I said, great, you want to book a showing on my listing? The government wants you to acknowledge these two forms. Guess what? No one ever got back to me. I would say 98% of people that sent a showing request when I said, okay, I can show you this place on Wednesday, but I need you to initial these forms electronically explaining risks of being an unrepresented party. 98% of people never got back to me because they were tire kickers in the first place. So fast forward to a few weeks ago, a listing agent phones me up and she says, hey Marco, I have a person here that emailed me off realtor.ca. They want to make an offer on my listing that I just listed. I don't want to do, any sort of unrepresented stuff. Can you represent this buyer because she has no realtor? And I'm like, oh God, I hate this, but sure, I'll do it. It's another realtor that I know is asking me to do this. The buyer contacts me. She tells me what she wants to offer. I ID her, etc. We write up the offer. And you got to keep in mind, this is all being done electronically because in this day and age, there's really no reason to meet in person to sign an offer. And the buyer's in Vancouver, we're in Victoria. It takes me 2 hours to write up the offer, negotiate the contract. We get an accepted offer. I send everything to the buyer, explain everything. Keep in mind at this point I'm representing this buyer, but this buyer originally was an unrepresented party. 400 pages of strata documents. I spent 6 hours reading these strata documents. I summarize it into 2 pages. It's actually a pretty good strata. I send it all off to the buyer. And then, as we're getting closer to condition removal, I say, hey, listen, you got to organize a lawyer, notary, deposit. The buyer just completely ghosts me, stops any sort of communication, completely disappears. The offer was subject to financing and strata documents. So the buyer could simply disappear with 0 consequences. So we had to wait 3 days after the buyer disappeared for the conditions to elapse at midnight. So I've wasted probably 8 to 10 hours with this buyer that's completely ghosted me. The sellers didn't know what's going on. And this is why I dislike unrepresented parties in real estate. Sure, 5% of people that are unrepresented are serious, but 95% of them are either tire kickers or extremely complicated people that are not able to maintain a professional relationship with the buyer's agent. And when someone's working with a buyer's agent, they're vetted. They're showing up to appointments. No buyer's agent's going to work with a buyer that's not going to show up to 5 appointments in a row. But when someone's unrepresented off realtors.ca, nothing prevents them from book a showing, doesn't show up, book a showing, doesn't show up, book a showing, doesn't show up, make an offer, disappears, make an offer, disappears. Anyone can go on realtor.ca, make an offer, and then completely disappear, because in BC, deposits are payable after condition removal for the most part. So that is why I personally really dislike unrepresented parties in real estate. This recent experience was a reminder of why I dislike unrepresented parties in real estate. And I'm thankful that in 2018, the government banned limited dual agency and introduced forms required for unrepresented parties, because that's cleared out like 90% of tire kickers in real estate. That's it for this week. Marco Juras, Fair Realty.